What would you do if you were 2 days away from being homeless, with no money, no options, and nowhere to turn? Would you make a choice you never thought you'd make? For Tyler Morgan, that choice would lead to a discovery hidden inside her for 20 years, a discovery that would change her life forever. Stick around, because this story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive in. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a reminder of the time slipping away. Tyler Morgan sat at her small desk, her laptop open to a half-finished assignment. The glow of the screen illuminated her tired face. It was late, too late, and she still had a night shift at the campus coffee shop ahead of her. But her mind wasn't on her work. It was on the stack of unpaid bills sitting on the corner of her desk, each one a silent demand for money she didn't have. Rent was due in 2 days, and she was out of options. Her part-time job barely covered groceries, let alone the mounting expenses. She had already borrowed from friends, sold what little she could, and even skipped meals to save money. But it wasn't enough. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from her roommate. Landlord called again. No more extensions. Tyler's heart sank. She had no choice. She had to do something, anything, to come up with the money. That's when she remembered the flyer. She had seen it earlier that day, pinned to the bulletin board in the student center. Earn cash for plasma donations, it had read. At the time, she had dismissed it. But now, with nowhere else to turn, it seemed like her only hope. Without allowing herself to overthink it, Tyler grabbed her coat and headed out into the cold November night. The donation center was just off campus, a place she had passed 100 times without really noticing. But tonight, it felt like a lifeline. The waiting room was brighter and cleaner than she had expected. A handful of students sat scattered around, scrolling on their phones or filling out paperwork. Tyler approached the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "First time?" the woman asked, her tone warm. Tyler nodded, forcing a tired smile. "Just saw your flyer on campus." "Well, you're helping people while helping yourself," the receptionist said. Win-win. The paperwork was extensive. Tyler filled out her personal information, medical history, and consent forms. But when she reached the section about inherited conditions, her hand hesitated. Her mother's side of the family was straightforward, but her father? He was a mystery. He had left when she was 3, and her mother rarely spoke of him. Tyler had no idea if there were any genetic conditions on his side. She left the section blank and handed the forms back to the receptionist. The donation process itself was simple enough. Tyler watched as her blood flowed through tubes, was processed through a machine that separated the plasma and then returned to her body. The technician, a young man with a friendly smile, commented on her good veins. "Not everyone's this easy on their first donation," he said. "Guess that's one thing going right today," Tyler joked, though her voice lacked its usual humor. When it was over, Tyler felt a little lightheaded but relieved. She received her $75 on a prepaid card, enough to cover the electric bill at least. Another donation would help with groceries. As she walked back to her apartment, she tried to push aside the nagging feeling that this was only a temporary fix. She had no idea that by this time tomorrow her life would change in ways she could never have imagined. The next day, Tyler was halfway through her shift at the coffee shop when her phone rang. The number was unknown, but something about it made her heart skip a beat. She stepped away from the counter to answer. "Is this Tyler Morgan?" a formal voice asked. "Yes, this is she," Tyler replied, her stomach twisting with unease. "This is Dr. Eleanor Winters from University Medical Center. I need to speak with you regarding your blood work from yesterday's donation." Tyler's heart sank. "Is everything okay?" "We'd prefer to discuss this in person," Dr. Winters said. "Could you come to the hospital this afternoon?" 3 hours later, Tyler sat nervously in a conference room at the hospital. The walls were a sterile white, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic. When the door opened, she was surprised to see not just Dr. Winters, but 3 other doctors in white coats. "Thank you for coming, Miss Morgan," Dr. Winters said, her tone serious. "Your blood contains an extremely rare genetic marker, one we've been searching for in our research on revolutionary new treatments." Tyler blinked, struggling to process the information. "I don't understand. Are you familiar with the Hammond Medical Research Foundation?" one of the other doctors asked. "Of course," Tyler said. Everyone in the medical field knew about Hammond. The foundation was established by Richard Hammond, a billionaire philanthropist who had dedicated his fortune to medical research. "Your blood markers match the Hammond family profile exactly," Dr. Winters said. Tyler's mind raced. "What does that mean?" "Richard Hammond had a daughter," the doctor continued. "The child and her mother were in a car accident. The mother died instantly. The 3-year-old girl survived but was taken by her maternal grandmother before Hammond could recover from his own injuries." A cold sensation spread through Tyler's chest. "My father's name is James Morgan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's the name on your birth certificate," Dr. Winters said gently. "But your genetic markers tell a different story." The third doctor opened a laptop and turned the screen toward Tyler. It showed a news article with a photo of an elderly man with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes that looked eerily like her own. "Richard Hammond has been searching for his daughter for almost 20 years, Dr. Winters said. "The accident left him in a coma for months. By the time he recovered, his child had disappeared." Tyler shook her head, her thoughts a jumbled mess. "This can't be right. I'm just a nursing student with overdue rent." "We're saying the genetic evidence is overwhelming," Dr. Winters replied. "And Mr. Hammond would very much like to meet you." As Tyler left the hospital, her mind was reeling. Could this possibly be true? Was the man she had always believed to be her father not her father at all? And if so, what did that mean for her life, her identity, her future? When she arrived at her apartment, a sleek black car was parked outside. A driver in a suit stood by the passenger door. "Miss Morgan," he said, "Mr. Hammond sent me. He landed early and would like to meet you now if possible." Tyler's heart pounded as she slid into the back seat. 20 minutes later, she found herself in the penthouse suite of the city's finest hotel. Standing by the windows, gazing out at the city, was the man from the photo, Richard Hammond. He turned as Tyler entered, and for a long moment, he simply stared. "You have your mother's smile," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "But those are definitely Hammond eyes." Tyler stood frozen in the doorway of the penthouse suite, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Richard Hammond could hear it. He was exactly as he appeared in the photo. Tall, distinguished, with piercing blue eyes that mirrored her own. But it was the emotion in his gaze that caught her off guard. There was no mistaking the raw, unspoken longing in his expression. "You have your mother's smile," he said again, his voice trembling slightly. "But those eyes, they're mine." Tyler didn't know what to say. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a strange, aching sadness she couldn't quite place. She had spent her entire life believing her father was a man named James Morgan, a man who had abandoned her and her mother when she was just a child. But now, standing face to face with Richard Hammond, she felt the ground beneath her shift. I don't know what to think," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard gestured to the plush sofa in the center of the room. "Please sit. I know this is a lot to take in." Tyler hesitated but eventually sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Richard sat across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've spent the last 20 years searching for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "After the accident, I was in a coma for months. When I woke up, You were gone. Your grandmother took you, and she made sure I couldn't find you. Tyler's chest tightened. My grandmother always said my father abandoned us. She told me he didn't want me. Richard's expression darkened with pain. That's not true. I loved your mother more than anything, and I loved you. I never stopped looking for you, Tyler, not for a single day. Tyler's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. This was all too much. She had come here expecting, what? Answers? Closure? But now, faced with the reality of her past, she felt more lost than ever. Richard reached for a leather portfolio on the table and pulled out a document. I don't expect you to suddenly accept me as your father, he said, sliding the paper toward her. But I would like to help you. Tyler glanced at the document. It was a bank statement with her name on it. The balance made her dizzy. $45 million. What is this? She asked, pushing the paper back as if it might burn her. Your trust fund, Richard replied simply. I established it the day you were born. It matured on your 21st birthday last year. Tyler shook her head, her mind reeling. I can't accept this. You don't even know me. You're my daughter, Richard said firmly. And from what the doctors tell me, you're studying nursing, working 2 jobs, and struggling to make ends meet. Let me help you, Tyler. Not just with money, but with your future. Tyler's thoughts raced. She thought of the overdue bills, the long hours at the coffee shop, the dreams of medical school she had buried deep inside her. She thought of the patients she had cared for during her clinical rotations, the ones who had looked at her with gratitude and trust. She thought of the spark of ambition she had never quite let die. What are you saying? She asked cautiously. Richard leaned forward, his eyes intense. The Hammond Medical Research Center needs someone like you, someone who understands both the science and the human element, someone with compassion and determination. I'd like to offer you a position there, with full medical school tuition covered. Tyler's breath caught in her throat. It was everything she had ever wanted, everything she had worked for. But it was also overwhelming. She had spent her entire life building her identity as Tyler Morgan, the nursing student who worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Who would she be if she accepted this? I'd need to finish my nursing degree first, she said finally, her voice steady. Richard smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. Of course, we have time now. What happens next? Does Tyler accept Richard's offer? How does this newfound wealth and opportunity change her life? Keep watching because the story is about to take an even more inspiring turn. Over the next few months, Tyler's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She finished her nursing degree with top honors, all while working part-time at the Hammond Medical Research Center. Richard was true to his word, covering her tuition and providing her with opportunities she had only dreamed of. But it wasn't just about the money or the career. For the first time in her life, Tyler felt like she belonged. Richard introduced her to his world, a world of philanthropy, innovation, and hope. She met scientists, researchers, and patients whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's work. And through it all, she began to see herself not just as Tyler Morgan, but as Tyler Hammond, a woman with the power to make a difference. Today, Tyler serves as the Chief Medical Officer at the Hammond Medical Research Center. Her blood samples, once donated out of desperation, have helped develop treatments for previously untreatable conditions. The photos on her office wall tell the story of her journey. A framed ATM receipt showing her last $84, her first blood donation record, and a family portrait with Richard at her medical school graduation. Richard often shares Tyler's story with business associates, but his version is never just about the medical breakthroughs or the family fortune. It's about Tyler, a young woman who faced hardship with dignity and whose desperate choice led to healing for thousands. In a world that asks, "What's in it for me?" Richard says, Tyler simply asked, "How can I help?" Even when she had nothing left to give. And that's the incredible story of Tyler Morgan, or should we say, Tyler Hammond. From a broke nursing student selling her plasma to the chief medical officer of one of the world's leading research centers, her journey is a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and the choices we make. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. And remember, life's biggest moments often begin with the smallest choices. See you in the next one.